When you think about going to the doctor for the usual checkup, there naturally has to be some degree of trust between the two of you. After all, doctors and nurses are in the business of taking care of us and making sure we're safe, right? Well, that's not always the case, as we'll soon learn. Welcome back to Twisted Minds. My name is James, and this is the case of Niels Hogel, a German former nurse and serial killer who is believed to have claimed the lives of 85 people between 2000 and 2005. However, more recently, police estimate that his victim count could be around 300 over the course of 15 years. If this is true, it would make Niels the most prolific serial killer in modern German history. Niels Hogel was born and raised in West Germany on December 30th, 1976. When he was a small boy, he grew up in the coastal town of Wilhelmshaven in Lower Saxony. Niels said that throughout his childhood, he was never exposed to violence at home. His parents didn't fight any more than a normal set of parents would, and his home was very well put together. He also explained that he grew up in a highly protective atmosphere. These days, most of us would probably call this type of home environment sheltered, and that definitely seems to be the case for Niels. His parents did everything within their power to keep him free from harm and to keep him on the straight and narrow. To top them off, both his father and his grandmother had dedicated their lives to helping people. They were both nurses, and it seems like Niels always looked up to them. His father set a great example for what a nurse should be, after having followed in the footsteps of his own mother. When Niels became of age, he decided that he would become a nurse as well. On the surface, it seemed like Niels also wanted to do everything within his power to help others in his community. However, as time passed by, his desires would become much darker and more sinister. Niels went through very in-depth training to become a nurse. Unlike nursing schools that you may find in the United States and other parts of the world, in Germany, at the time, nursing could be taken as a vocational course instead of requiring countless years of college. By 1997, Niels had completed his training and became a nurse, working at St. Willehad Hospital. He was just 21 years of age. By 2004, Niels had begun to explore other opportunities in life. Niels managed to find love and decided to settle down a bit more. He and his longtime girlfriend were married in 2004, and later that year, his wife would give birth to their daughter. By 1999, Niels had decided to move on from his job at the hospital and began working for a different clinic, while holding down an identical position as a nurse. This was a result of accepting a job offer at Oldenburg Clinic. He would be tasked with taking care of patients in the intensive care unit at a cardiac surgery ward known as Ward 211. Niels had been working here for several years before staff members began to get a bit suspicious of him. By August of 2001, just 2 years after accepting his new job, a large meeting was called at the clinic. The board members were concerned that a shockingly large number of patients had been losing their lives over the last year. The leaders explained that there was an unusually large number of deaths that had seemingly come out of nowhere. To top this off, there was also an increase in the number of resuscitations and an increase in the number of deaths months after resuscitation. According to the board, 58% of these deaths took place while Niels was on duty. After the meeting had drawn to a close, Niels knew that the leaders of the clinic were onto him. The following day, he would call in sick for work and would remain away from the clinic for a total of 3 weeks. For Niels, this seemed like the perfect way to lay low. However, he only made his situation worse. This is because after leaving his job for a short time, the number of deaths dramatically decreased at the clinic. For some of the workers who were suspicious of him, this proved that Niels may have had a part in some of the unusual deaths that had been taking place recently. Once he returned back to work, Niels was asked by one of the head physicians in Ward 211 to transfer to a different unit. It's unknown if this was due to a difference in opinion or if the doctor truly felt that Niels' skills would be more useful elsewhere. Nevertheless, Niels accepted his proposal and would soon be transferred to the anesthesiology unit later that year in 2001. It was at this point that the heat really began to amp up for Niels. The head physician at his new ward explained that he didn't like how Niels always forced himself into emergency situations. To add to this, he explained to Niels that after he would become involved in emergency situations, the patients would have a significantly higher chance of passing away or facing serious difficulties. The doctor never accused Niels of anything outright, but it seems as though his words were very clear. Soon after the two had this conversation, Niels was approached by one of the leaders of the clinic. The worker gave Niels an ultimatum. Niels was told that he would need to transfer units once again or be fired from his position and given 3 months of severance pay. If he accepted the transfer, he would be placed in the logistics unit that did nothing but help move patients from one place to another throughout the hospital and clinic. That way, potential lives weren't in danger. It doesn't seem like Niels liked either of these options. Soon after the conversation with the clinic leader, he began looking for a job elsewhere. Just a couple of weeks after the meeting with the leader of the clinic, Niels was given a very good reference letter by one of his superiors. In the letter, the superior explained that Niels was an incredible nurse that always went above and beyond what was expected of him. The letter acknowledged his devotedness and cooperative conduct as well, and even explained that every task he completed was to the utmost satisfaction. It seems that even though the clinic threatened to fire him, they didn't hold any ill will against him, or they really just wanted him to move on. It's difficult to know which way they were leaning. By December of that year, 2002, Niels had accepted a new job at the Delmenhorst Clinic. Unfortunately, his questionable behavior did not end when he left his former job. At his new clinic, the dark cloud would continue to linger over Niels and his clinic. As soon as he joined the new team, deaths rose to unprecedented levels. Fatalities began to rise and were occurring every time Niels was on duty. For the most part, these patients would be losing their lives due to arrhythmia or other blood and heart-related problems. Many of his new coworkers began to shy away from him, not wanting to become involved in whatever was going on around him. It seems that many of his superiors were suspicious of him as well, but none of them took a step forward and accused him of anything, as police would later find out in court proceedings. By all means, this was gross negligence on the part of the clinic, as some of his coworkers had found 4 empty vials of adrenaline while Niels was on duty one day, which causes life-threatening arrhythmia and heart-related problems. This information was taken to the leaders of the clinic, but they did nothing to stop him. A brief investigation into the matter proved that no doctors had prescribed that medication recently, and none of the patients had been taking that medication when the vials were found. All eyes were now on Niels, though it seemed like everyone around him was too scared to do anything about it. By June of 2005, police were finally beginning to close in on Niels. One of his coworkers had managed to catch him intentionally sabotaging a patient's medical pump. As the worker soon learned, he had been injecting it with adrenaline, the same chemical he was suspected of 3 years prior. This incident was enough to finally get the police involved, so they showed up and began conducting an investigation. As you probably suspected, they found that Niels had been tampering with other patients throughout the years, and soon enough, the case began to explode. Police requested all of the death records and time cards for the previous 2 years, taking their investigation all the way back to 2003. It didn't take them long at all to begin connecting the dots, and every trail they followed led back to Niels. The investigation would soon come to the conclusion that over the last 2 years, at least 73% of the deaths at this clinic could be connected to Niels in some way or another. Though, it seems like the law works much differently in Germany than it does in other parts of the world. Even though this was definitely proven by investigators, there was still only a small penalty to be paid by Niels. Rather than being sentenced to prison for life, as he would have been if he lived in the United States, he was only facing 5 years behind bars and a temporary suspension of his nursing license. After being taken to trial with these allegations, he was found guilty in December of 2006. He was then taken away to prison to face his punishment. However, he wouldn't get off that easily. No sooner than his sentence was handed down, a team appealed his conviction. Soon enough, his conviction was reversed, but not the way you might be expecting. It wasn't reversed so as to release Niels from prison. Rather, it was reversed in exchange for a larger sentence. In the end, he was handed a 7.5-year sentence, and his nursing license was to be permanently revoked. By January of 2014, it was almost time for Niels to be released from prison. Police knew that he must have been involved in more crimes than he had been previously sentenced for. So they began working on getting to the bottom of every last death that occurred on Niels' watch. The local district attorney's office helped with the investigation, and by September of 2014, Niels Hogel was suspected of at least 3 counts of murder, as well as 2 counts of attempted murder. It seems that at this point, Niels knew that the game was up and that he had been found out. He decided not to resist the charges and instead confessed. Though, he shocked the police with his confession. Not only did Niels accept involvement for taking the lives of 3 people and trying to take the lives of 2 others, but he added that he had claimed the lives of at least 30 others during this time. After investigating the issues even further, officers learned of 90 patients that had been poisoned by Niels. Of these 90 patients, about 60 were successfully resuscitated. However, the remaining 30 lost their lives. Just a few months after learning this, Niels Hogel was sentenced to life in prison. His sentence was finalized in March of 2015. The problem is that despite all of this, prosecutors still don't know the motive behind Niels' crimes. They suspect that he simply acted out of boredom and a sick desire to kill. However, others believe that he may have been trying to showcase how good he was at resuscitating someone, though this is nothing but speculation. You may be thinking that this is where the case begins to die down, but you'd be painfully wrong. Investigators still suspect that there was far more to this case than meets the eye, so they continued their investigations even further and kept digging into Niels' past, as well as the many deaths that took place at his various places of work. By October of 2014, they had learned that another 200 people had likely been victimized. Though these weren't cases like they had investigated previously. Before, of the 90 people Niels had victimized, only 30 passed away. However, of the 200 cases they were now investigating, all 200 of them passed away, meaning there were likely hundreds of others who had been poisoned by Niels but simply didn't know about it. The case had grown to such a massive degree that the local police needed to create a special task force to investigate Niels' crimes, with the task force being dubbed Cardio, spelt with a K. The prosecutors knew that they needed to concrete evidence to help push these cases forward. To do this, they decided to exhume 134 of the victims that were linked to the cases. This task led them to visit 67 different cemeteries, but in most of these cases, the victims had decomposed far too much to be able to prove their allegations. In addition to these cases, a further 101 victims were suspected, but their bodies had been cremated, so there was no way to verify these accusations. Even more suspected victims were exhumed in 2015, and it was found that they had trace amounts of unprescribed heart medication in their blood. 37 other cases were opened in 2016, but it was around this time that police realized that their efforts were futile. No matter how many victims they managed to uncover, nothing was going to alter Niels' sentence. Thus, they began to take a step back on their investigative efforts and revealed to the public in 2017 that he was officially connected to around 90 cases, but that they suspected him of hundreds more. It was here that his case eventually died down while officers submitted their information to the courts, awaiting a trial that was scheduled to take place in 2018 and 2019. In the end, 100 charges were placed against Niels at trial. Niels Hogel admitted to 43 of the cases on the first day of the trial. He claimed that he couldn't remember 52 of the victims, then denied any involvement in 5 of the remaining victims. As the trial finally came to a close, Niels Hogel was found guilty of 85 murders. Needless to say, he will be spending the rest of his life behind bars, but the impact of his actions still resonate through the community, and it seems like police may still be investigating some additional cases that could be placed against him in the coming years. Thanks for tuning in to Twisted Minds. That was the case of Niels Hogel, and why don't you go ahead and click on one of the 2 videos on your screen for another one of our videos.